The WarioWare series is one of the most iconic Nintendo franchises, and while each game is slightly different, the premise is generally the same. Play a flurry of incredibly short microgames until you reach a boss level. Despite the popularity of the series, few people actually know about the interesting start it had. The franchise actually finds its original ideas in the game Mario artist Polygon Studio. Released on August 29, 2000, Polygon Studio was the last release in the Japanese exclusive Mario Artist series. The game was an art program where you could create your own 3D models and even explore a 3D map called the Experimental World. Within this program, there was a small side game, Sound Bomber, a game where your goal is to survive a rapid-fire onslaught of short mini-games that get faster and harder the more you played. The team behind Polygon Studio apparently loved the game mode so much that they decided they wanted to make a full-fledged game based around it. The members chosen for this team are Yoshio Sakamoto, who's known for his work on the Metroid series, Goro Abe, Ko Takayuchi, and Ryuichi Nakada. Most of the team members have worked on Wario Land, so it's fitting that they decided to use Wario. They claimed it was because no other character in mind would fit that role as well as him. Wario is always doing stupid things and is really idiotic, so we thought him and the rest of the characters would be best for the game. The team worked on the game in secret and got full development approval once they presented it to their manager. When they decided to make the individual microgames, each person would write down an idea, then put it on a post-it note. The game was apparently so well known around the department that even people outside of the project decided to join in and add their ideas. By the end of this, they had over 300 post-it notes that they decided to use as microgames, either in this game or in future titles, 213 of which made it into their first game. Developed by Nintendo R&D 1, WarioWare Inc. Mega Microgames was the team's first installment in the series. Released for the Game Boy Advance in late March 2003, the game started with you only having access to the main story mode. In it, you play a character's level, which has several microgames until you reached a boss microgame. You have 4 lives, and every time you fail a microgame, you lose one until it's game over and you have to repeat the level. The microgames for each level all revolve around the theme of the level's character. The characters whose microgames you play in this game are Wario, Jimmy T, Dribble and Spitz, Mona, 9V, Orbulon, Dr. Krieger, and Cat and Anna. After beating the main game, you even unlock an endless mode, where you have to play a certain character's microgames until you lose. Upon release, the game was an incredibly massive success, receiving critical acclaim across the board, with people absolutely loving the wackiness of it all. A lot of that is thanks to the fact that each programmer had to create their own graphics for their microgames, giving each one a drastically different art style. To this day, Mega Microgames has sold over 1.1 million copies. After the release of Mega Microgames, the team had focused on 2 projects, a WarioWare game set to release on the Nintendo DS, and one that they were working on for the Game Boy Advance. Using the Game Boy's rotation sensors and rumble features, they created WarioWare Twisted. Developed once again by Nintendo R&D 1 and releasing in mid-October 2004 in Japan, and an entire 6 months later for the NA and PAL versions, the microgames operated along the idea of rotating the Game Boy Advance clockwise and counterclockwise. With Twisted came the introduction of 2 new important characters, 18V and Wario Man. 18V works as 9V's partner, similar to Dribble and Spitz. Wario Man, who is just Wario's alter ego, acts as a final level for the game. All of his microgames are much harder versions of the ones found in the Wario level. Twisted has 223 microgames, making it the second largest WarioWare game in terms of microgame count. Similar to its predecessor, WarioWare Twisted boasted incredible review scores and sold phenomenally, reaching over 700,000 copies sold as of today. However, like I said earlier, this wasn't the only game they were working on. During the development of Twisted, the team had been presented with the Nintendo DS, a handheld console with two screens, the lower one being a touchscreen. Seeing the potential in the device, the team decided to split between working on the two games. Sakamoto had to scramble to find a new director for this game. Newcomer Ryuichi Nakata was eventually chosen as chief director, while Goro Abe, Tako Tsukiyoga, and Teruyuki Hirasawa were the game's other directors. What became of that project was WarioWare Touch. Developed not by Nintendo R&D1, but instead by Intelligent Systems and releasing on the Nintendo DS in December 2004 in Japan, WarioWare Touch was the third installment of the series. Funnily enough, Touch actually released before Twisted in their North American and PAL releases. The microgames in this series all rely on the DS's stylus, touchscreen, and microphone. New to this game are two characters, Ashley the Child Witch, and Mike the Living Microphone. The microgame count in this game is a bit smaller at 190. Despite that, WarioWare Touch was an enormous success, selling nearly 2.5 million copies and receiving high praise. Moving away from handhelds for a game, the team decided to develop on Nintendo's brand new console, the Nintendo Wii. Abe and Sakamoto were both very optimistic about the Wii, saying its remote controls allowed you to do practically anything. Developed by about 20 people, with some coming and going, WarioWare Smooth Moves released in December 2006. This game utilized holding and moving the Wii remote in different poses. New to this game are Young Cricket and Master Mantis, a sword training master and his student, Penny, the young inventor and Dr. Crygor's granddaughter, and Jimmy P, a yellow-haired look-alike to Jimmy T. The game also introduced plenty of multiplayer side games, as multiplayer was an important consideration in the development cycle. Smooth Moves was an insane success, selling over 1.8 million copies and receiving high scores across the board. After Smooth Moves, the team realized that with the power of the DS, it was time to implement user-made microgames. Abe said that it made sense because of how simplistic they tended to be. So, in April 2009, WarioWare DIY came out. The game had a surprisingly rich level editor with the ability to make your own music, create sprites, and even add basic logic to some objects. It was even used to make the microgames in the story mode. The editor also had plenty of UI elements that resembled those of the Mario Artist series. The game did very well in terms of reviews, and sold over 570,000 copies. The only criticism people had was the incredibly short story mode, and the fact that the story levels only unlock 24 hours after beating the previous level, but the incredible abilities of the editor more than made up for that. Almost 10 years later, WarioWare finally had a proper return with WarioWare Gold on the 3DS in July 2018. The team wanted a return to form after a long hiatus, so they decided to return to the formula of the original game, while upping the microgame count to 300, even though most of those were just revamped older microgames. The game received a lot of praise, especially after the disaster that was Game & Wario, but despite that, the game sold poorly for two major reasons. One, the game had very minimal promotion, only being promoted very close to the release date, and two, the game was sold on the 3DS at the end of the device's lifetime and a whole year after the Switch had released. Compared to the other WarioWare games, Gold only sold around 280,000 copies. And that's the history of WarioWare. Except that's not it. There are three more games that need to be mentioned, but they're odd cases. The first of these is WarioWare Inc. Mega Party Games. This game was essentially just a re-release of the original game, but on the GameCube. The only thing of significance is that they added a few bonus multiplayer modes, but removed the story mode. Otherwise, there's not much to say. The second one of these games is WarioWare Snapped. The game was DSiWare that was incredibly short, and intended only to show off the capabilities of the DSi's camera. Just like Mega Party Games, there's no story mode. The third of these was Game & Wario. Unlike the other two, this was a full-fledged game with a story mode. However, Game & Wario was not a WarioWare game, but rather a WarioWare spin-off. Released on the Wii U in 2013, the game was a weird one compared to the rest of the series. It only had 12 minigames, but they were all a lot bigger than the microgames of the previous titles. This game was incredibly bland, and critics took note of that. The game sold incredibly poorly, and stands as the current only WarioWare spin-off. And that is the history of WarioWare.